Okay, so in this episode of Grim Dawn Basics, we are going to be talking about offensive ability and defensive ability. And offensive and defensive ability, there isn't an elegant way I can think of to really show like high offensive ability versus low defensive ability. All I can point out is that every crit you see a character do means that they've crossed the threshold of offensive ability versus the target's defensive ability. So let's see if I can get into this, and I'm going to be reading it straight off the game guide, um, while sharing the its probability to hit threshold as well. So, offensive ability and defensive ability are critical to both your ability to deal out damage and in your own survival. If you let your offensive ability fall behind as you level, you will find that more and more of your attacks will miss and not crit. Similarly, an insufficient defensive ability will result in your enemies not only landing blows more frequently, but also sometimes landing devastating critical hits. The relationship between offensive and defensive ability is handled in the following equation. You may want to go to the game guide on your own to look this up and to follow along at home. So, probability to hit, PTH, equals a whole mess of stuff. So, it's about 4 brackets worth of an equation here, but I'll read it out as it goes along. So, attacker's offensive ability divided by, oh god. I'm trying to see what's at the core of this, because it is a mangle of an equation they have here. So the core, it is such a complicated thing, because it's basically 2 things are added together, and then 50 is subtracted from it. So the first thing, the core of it looks like you take the defender's defensive ability and divide it by 3.5, then add the attacker's offensive ability. That's 1. Then you take the attacker's OA and divide it by that number, multiply that all by 300, then multiply all that by 0.3. Then you take, not even joking on this, then you take the attacker's offensive ability times by 3.5 plus 10,000, minus the defender's DA times 3.25 divided by 100. Multiply all of that by 0.7. Add those 2 numbers together, divide by 50. The value resulting from this calculation is your chance to strike the target. You may notice that it is feasible for your character to get over 100. This is where critical multiplier thresholds come in. So, essentially what this equation is every time a hit is dealt. So if we go back to our trading dummy, I'm just going to walk up and hit it. Every time my character swings his weapon, or does Caladar's Tempest, an attack, like that long-ass equation is done. So like this, that equation is done for every tick. Every single tick of Albrecht's Aether Ray. Every single, say, devastation thing that actually lands a hit there. Wow. Every single time a hit is done against you or against the enemy, that mangle of an equation is invoked. So, yeah, and that's for both offensive and defensive ability. They work very much in concert. So I'm just going to sum up what that means. Higher offensive ability means more chance to hit, and then more chance to crit. Higher defensive ability means less chance to be hit, and less chance to be critted. Okay, so the probability to hit threshold, number 1, 70, is 1.0 damage. If your probability to hit threshold is lower than 70, any attacks that land will do reduced damage. The damage reduction multiplier is equal to your probability to hit divided by 70. So by example, they say if it's 65, you'll do 92.86% of normal damage on hit, or about 65 of 70. So take 65 divided by 70. It is highly uncommon to go below a probability to hit of 70, though it can happen against targets that are especially higher level than you. So, example, probability hit is 65, 1 to 65 hits for 93. Okay, whatever. So, PTH threshold 2, 90. This is 1.1 times damage. When your probability to hit reaches 90 and beyond, you will begin to see critical hits. Threshold 3, 105, 1.2 times damage. At probability to hit 100 and above, you cannot miss your target. At probability to hit 105 plus, you will begin to see a second tier of critical hits. So if we go over to our training dummy, and when we see a crit happen, we're at 1.5. That means I am crossing thresholds 5 and 6 with this character against training dummies. It's a little different in the field. So when you see a 1.2 times crit in your little box, that in that little parentheses, that's what's happening there. It's telling you which level of crit you've reached. So, hit level 4 is 120. At probability hit 120 and above, you will begin to see the third tier of crits. And then thresholds 5 and 6 are 130 and 133, which are 1.4 times damage and 1.5 times damage. The pattern continues for the final 2 tiers of critical hits. Beyond the 6th threshold, you will no longer see higher crit values, but you will see critical hits more reliably. So you'll end up seeing like 1.5 times damage. Now, you might see higher, maybe. I seem to remember seeing higher crit multipliers, but that may just be me misremembering something. So according to this, you'll go up to 6 thresholds, and that's what we're crossing when we go over here. And if we see a crit, we'll see 1 point. Yeah, I think you can actually get... Okay, yeah, 1.5, 1.6. So yeah, there are a couple higher... You'll get higher than that, but... according to the game guide, it only says there's 6 thresholds. That might be old, or it might just be... Well, whatever. Okay, so offensive and defensive ability. All that talking essentially sums up to this. Higher is better. Higher is better if... Oh, okay. Lower defensive ability is better against your enemies. So if you have something that lowers your enemy's defensive ability, like, say, flashbangs, would reduce an enemy's defensive ability by 210 with this character for 6 seconds. So for 6 seconds, the enemy with reduced defensive ability is more prone to getting hit and more prone to taking crits. So if we walk over to that training dummy, this is going to be weird in this character because he has so many things that actually pop off this. We've hit the enemy with this, so we should see higher... Yep, we're seeing higher crit values. So, that is a summation of offensive and defensive ability. They're pretty necessary for a character to function in the game, but they aren't like the end all be all of, like, offensive ability used to be everything, and they sort of toned that back a bit. It's still really important, and getting high crits, obviously it's important, but I mean, it's not an end all be all thing anymore. Also, as you go through the game, actually defensive ability becomes less and less relevant. This is just from personal experience, because I know that when you get into Ultimate, you can start to really, really get hit hard, regardless of your defensive ability. So unless you're making a character, that is super, super tanky, that really needs defensive ability to survive, about 2,000 is where is a good value. Offensive ability in the end game, about 2,000 to 2,500 is usually good, I've found. Anything more is a little on the gratuitous side, and you're probably over-specializing. So anyways, now I'm starting to ramble. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative, and I will see you guys next time.